I never thought the most painful wound of my life would come from my own daughter's laughter. Not the kind of laughter you hear when your child is happy, but the sharp kind, the cruel kind, the kind that makes you feel like a fool in front of strangers. That night at her wedding, I stood there with a small velvet box in my hand, a gift I had kept safe for more than 3 decades, and I watched her turn it into a punchline. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. I gave Emma a watch, not just any watch, but a Hamilton from the early 80s, the same brand I bought with my first serious paycheck, back when I worked 12-hour shifts at the steel mill in Pittsburgh. It cost me $1,200 back then, which was a fortune to a man who brought home maybe $18 an hour before taxes. I wore that watch when I married her mother. I wore it when I carried her out of the hospital, in a blanket with little yellow ducks. For me, that watch wasn't just metal and gears. It was proof of the years I fought to give her a future. But when she unwrapped it at the reception in Napa Valley, in front of her new husband's family and a ballroom full of people sipping $90 bottles of wine, Emma chuckled and said, "That's all you could give me?" I swear, time froze. Guests leaned in, smirks spreading like wildfire. Even her new in-laws smiled politely, but I could see the judgment in their eyes. Cheap, working class, out of place. What hurt wasn't the words, but the way she looked at me, like I was small, like I had never mattered. The irony? She didn't know the truth. Nobody did. For 30 years I had kept a secret so large it would have flipped her world upside down. She thought I was a simple old man, living off Social Security checks and a tiny pension, while she pranced around in designer heels and scoffed at coupons in my kitchen drawer. I remember how she once asked, half joking but half serious, "Dad, do you even have a retirement plan?" I laughed it off and changed the subject, because if I had told her then, if I had opened the books, it would have changed everything. I didn't want money to poison our relationship. I wanted her to love me for the man who taught her to ride a bike in the cracked driveway of our Cleveland home, not for the bank account I built in silence. But there I was, standing under crystal chandeliers, while my only daughter turned my most meaningful gift into a spectacle. And it wasn't just her words that cut deep, it was the applause and laughter that followed. Strangers clapping as if mocking me was part of the entertainment. I looked at my son-in-law, Mark, this polished young lawyer from a family that handed him a Porsche at 21. He smirked, like he was finally proven right about me, a simple man with a simple life, a father not worth respect. If only they knew. Because what they didn't realize, what even Emma didn't realize, was that the simple man in front of them had quietly built something much bigger than they could imagine. I wasn't just living off a pension. I had been investing since 1998, slipping a few thousand into Apple stock back when everyone thought the company was finished. I bought rental homes in Florida after the 2008 crash, when people were too scared to touch real estate. I wasn't living hand to mouth. I was sitting on a fortune that would make her husband's family condo in Miami look like pocket change. And yet, I stayed quiet. For years I swallowed my pride, thinking silence was the nobler path. But that night, something inside me cracked. I realized I wasn't protecting her anymore. I was enabling her arrogance. I let her believe the lie that I was small, because I thought it kept us close. But in reality, it gave her permission to trample on my dignity. So when she laughed, I didn't just feel insulted. I felt awake. That night, I made a decision that would change everything she thought she knew about her father, her marriage, and the life she believed she deserved. And I swear to you, when I was done, she would never laugh at me again. After that wedding night, I barely slept. I lay in the overpriced hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing her laugh on a loop. I thought about every hour I had worked overtime in the steel mill, the burns on my arms, the nights I came home smelling like iron and sweat, just so she could grow up in a house with heat in the winter and a full fridge. And now she had turned my sacrifices into a punchline. The next morning, while guests were still recovering from their hangovers and the champagne haze, I sat alone in the courtyard with a black coffee that cost $8 a cup. I watched the servers clean up the mess of half-empty wine bottles and wilted roses, and I thought, why am I still hiding? See, my story isn't one of luck. It's one of grit, and maybe a bit of stubbornness. Back in 1998, when Apple shares were trading around $1 after their stock split, I scraped together $10,000 from a retirement fund and bought in. I didn't tell anyone. Not Emma, not even her mother. People at the plant thought I was insane. Who bets on a tech company when your neighbors are losing their homes? But I had this gut feeling, the same one that made me hold on during the 2008 crash, when everyone else panicked. By the time Emma graduated high school in 2010, that small gamble had grown into 7 figures. And still, I played the role of the struggling dad. I wore Levi's until the knees wore through, patched up my Chevy instead of buying a new car, packed peanut butter sandwiches for lunch. I didn't want her to feel like money solved everything. I wanted her to understand work. But the cruel irony? My silence taught her the opposite. It made her believe I was beneath her. When Emma got into Boston University, I wrote a check for the full tuition each year. $55,000, not counting dorms, books, flights. I never once let her feel the burden. She thought loans covered it. I let her believe that because I didn't want her bragging about daddy's money to her friends. Mark, her husband, came into the picture during her junior year. Polished, cocky, with a law internship in New York and an Amex Black Card from his parents. I'll never forget the first Thanksgiving he joined us. He looked around my kitchen at the scratched Formica countertops and the old Sears fridge and said, "Cozy place, Mr. Turner." Cozy. That was his polite way of saying cheap. Emma laughed and agreed. I kept quiet. For years. But after the wedding humiliation, I saw it clearly. Silence was no longer noble. It was cowardice. Still, I wasn't reckless. I knew revenge needed patience. So instead of exploding that night, I started planning. The first step was to gather proof of what I had. Not just bank statements, but deeds, stocks, even the original purchase slips from the rental homes I picked up in Orlando for $85,000 apiece during the foreclosure wave. I organized it all in a binder, page after page of numbers that could have paid for Emma's dream wedding 10 times over. And here's the part that still twists my stomach. While I was gathering those papers, I found something else. Old emails, messages Emma sent to her college friends, mocking me. She wrote things like, "My dad still clips coupons like it's 1975, and can't wait to marry into a real family with money." Real family. As if I wasn't real enough. That cut deeper than her wedding laughter. It was betrayal in black and white. She wasn't just embarrassed by me, she was ashamed of me. And that shame was about to become her undoing. Because as much as she wanted to believe she had married into a fortune, I knew the truth about Mark's family. They weren't swimming in money, they were drowning in debt. A buddy of mine from the plant now worked at a regional bank. And one night, over beers, he told me Mark's father had leveraged nearly everything on failed condos in Miami. Their gift of a $1.5 million condo at the wedding? It wasn't free and clear, it was collateral. So Emma had laughed at the one man who could have actually secured her future, while she tied herself to a sinking ship. And I, the quiet man with coupons in his drawer, held the one card that could shatter their illusions forever. But the question gnawed at me. If I played that card, would I be protecting my daughter or destroying her? That was the line I was standing on when I decided to take the next step. And believe me, what I did next would not just expose the truth, it would turn her world upside down. I carried that binder everywhere for weeks, like a weapon I wasn't ready to fire. Inside it was everything. Proof that the simple man Emma mocked had built something real, something lasting. Yet every time I thought about confronting her, a question tore at me. Was I doing this to save her, or to finally make her bleed the way she'd made me bleed. The breaking point came 3 weeks after the wedding. Emma invited us over for dinner at their new condo in downtown Cleveland. I walked in and instantly recognized the kind of place it was. Flashy on the outside, hollow on the inside. Granite counters, stainless appliances, wine fridge stocked with bottles that cost more than my monthly mortgage back in the 80s. But I knew those walls carried debt heavier than steel beams. Dinner was uncomfortable from the start. Mark bragged about his firm's big cases. Emma showed off a designer bag she claimed was a gift from her in-laws. Then she looked across the table at me and said, "Dad, you really should think about selling that old house of yours. You'd be happier in a community like this." It wasn't advice. It was dismissal. The subtext was clear. My life, my home, my choices. They were beneath her now. I sipped my water, trying to keep calm. But then Mark leaned in with that smirk I'd grown to hate and said, "Honestly, Mr. Turner, I don't know how you managed to pay for Emma's tuition. Must have been a miracle on a mill worker's salary. That was it. The last straw." I reached into my leather bag and laid the binder on the table. Emma looked confused. Mark looked amused, like I was about to pull out more coupons. But as I opened it and slid the first page across, my Apple stock statements, their faces shifted. Smirks turned into silence. Emma whispered, "Dad, what is this?" I didn't answer. I flipped page after page. Property deeds from Orlando, bank statements, brokerage accounts. By the time I got to the page showing the condo her in-laws had gifted, wasn't even owned outright, Emma's face was pale. Mark tried to brush it off, mumbling, "Anyone can print numbers." But I had notarized copies. Receipts dating back 2 decades. This wasn't theater. This was truth. And then came the twist I'd been holding back. I told Emma I'd already met with an estate lawyer, that my will was updated, that not a single cent of the $25 million fortune she never knew about would go directly to her. Instead, it was locked into charitable trusts and scholarships. The only way she'd ever touch it was by proving herself through work that mattered, something she'd mocked me for all her life. The silence at that table was thicker than the steak on our plates. Emma's hands trembled. Mark's jaw tightened. Here's the part that makes people debate whether I was cruel or fair. I didn't do it to punish her with poverty. I did it because I wanted her to feel the ground under her feet for once, to know that security isn't handed over in a velvet box. But in that moment, I'll admit, it felt damn good to see the shock in her eyes. Then Emma said something I'll never forget. "So all these years, you let me believe you were broke? You made me feel embarrassed to bring friends over, ashamed of where I came from, and you were sitting on millions?" I felt my throat tighten. She wasn't entirely wrong. I had hidden the truth. I had chosen silence. But was I wrong to protect her from becoming exactly what she had become? Spoiled, arrogant, ungrateful. The dinner ended with slammed doors and cold stares. As I walked out, binder tucked back under my arm, I realized the damage wasn't just financial. It was emotional, permanent. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about breaking illusions. But illusions don't die quietly. 2 days later, I got a call. It was Emma. Her voice cracked as she said, "Dad, we need to talk." "It's about Mark, and you were right." When Emma called me that night, I almost didn't answer. My pride told me to let the phone ring out, to make her stew in the silence she'd left me in after that dinner. But a father's heart is a strange thing. No matter how deep the wound, when your child sounds broken, you pick up. Her voice was shaky. "Dad, it's Mark. He's in trouble." A lot of trouble. I didn't say much, just asked her to come over. 30 minutes later, she was at my door. Mascara smudged, hair undone, nothing like the polished bride from Napa Valley. She clutched her designer purse like it was a life raft. She told me everything. Mark had borrowed against the condo, against their future, against her name. He was sitting on nearly $500,000 in hidden debt. The successful lawyer had been gambling, not just in casinos, but with clients' trust funds. And now one of those clients was threatening to file a complaint with the state bar. If it went through, Mark wouldn't just lose his license. He could face prison. I listened quietly, letting her spill it all, and I'll admit, part of me felt vindicated. All those years of her mocking my coupons and my patched-up Chevy, and here she was, terrified of losing the roof over her head. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Life was doing it for me. Still, I couldn't resist asking, "And this is the man you laughed with when I gave you my watch?" Her eyes filled with tears. She didn't answer. That night I went back to the binder. I laid out copies of my accounts, my deeds, my investments. But instead of using them to save her, I used them to teach her. I showed her how wealth is built slow, brick by brick, not on credit cards and lies. I could see the shame creeping over her like a shadow. But I didn't stop there. I knew Mark's family was still trying to keep up appearances, throwing parties, buying gifts they couldn't afford. So I made a call, a quiet one, to a contact at the local paper, who loved a good story about hypocrisy. I handed over just enough: the condo mortgage records, the liens, the lawsuit brewing against Mark's firm. 1 week later, the article hit the front page of the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Young attorney faces financial scandal. His in-laws' names were dragged into it, their fortune exposed for the house of cards it was. Emma called me again, this time screaming. "Did you have something to do with this?" I didn't lie. "No, Emma. Your husband's choices did this. I just stopped protecting the image she hung up." I sat there in my recliner, staring at the watch on my wrist, the twin to the one I'd given her. For the first time in decades, I felt the weight of it differently. It wasn't just a relic, it was proof that discipline and patience outlast arrogance. Days later, I got a letter in the mail from Mark's firm. They wanted me to help cover some of his debts in exchange for dropping the complaint. Imagine the audacity. After mocking me, after humiliating me, now they wanted me to be their savior. I wrote back with a single line: "Not a chance." Here's where some people will say I was cruel. A father should rescue his daughter no matter what. But I disagree. A father's job isn't to shield his child from every consequence. It's to make sure they finally learn. And the learning was just beginning. Because once the article broke, clients fled Mark's firm. Creditors called daily. Emma's fancy dinners stopped. The designer bags went back to their boxes. The life she thought she married into was crumbling faster than she could keep up. Meanwhile, the community saw me differently. Neighbors who once pitied the old mill worker started asking me for advice. Local schools thanked me for the quiet donations I'd been making for years. I wasn't small anymore. I wasn't invisible. I was finally standing tall in the light I'd hidden for too long. But with that light came a darker truth. Emma wasn't calling to reconnect. She was calling because she needed saving, and I knew the moment of decision was coming. Would I use my fortune to lift her up, or would I let her face the fall she'd chosen? As I folded the binder shut, I told myself one thing. The next move would be the one she'd never forget. The call came on a gray Tuesday morning. Emma's voice was tight, almost brittle. "Dad, they're investigating Mark." "The Bar Association, the feds, I don't know what to do." I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the sound of her world collapsing. Part of me ached for her, because no father likes to see his child drowning. But another part, the wounded part, the humiliated man who had been laughed at in front of strangers, knew this was the justice I had been waiting for. Within weeks, the investigation went public. Mark had not only mismanaged funds, he had outright stolen from a client trust. The paper trail was undeniable. His license was suspended, then revoked, and soon after, federal charges were filed. The young attorney who once smirked at my coupons was suddenly facing the possibility of years behind bars. The fallout was brutal. His parents, the ones who had flaunted their Miami condo and luxury cars, were forced to declare bankruptcy. Their name, once plastered on charity galas and country club walls, became a whisper spoken with pity or contempt. Emma's picture-perfect life unraveled piece by piece, until all that was left was the same watch she once mocked, sitting untouched in its velvet box. But here's the twist she never saw coming. I had met with my lawyer weeks earlier, before all this broke, and finalized my estate plan. Everything, every dollar, every property was set aside for scholarships, veterans' hospitals, and a foundation in my late wife's name. I left Emma something small, just enough for her to live without fear of hunger, but not enough to buy another illusion. And I recorded a letter, not to shame her, but to explain why. The letter played at a family gathering, just after the indictment hit the news. I told her the truth, that my silence wasn't poverty, it was discipline, that my love wasn't measured in money, but in the years I broke my back to build her future, and that respect, once lost, can't be bought back with apologies or crocodile tears. I watched her face as she listened. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just stared at the floor, the weight of everything finally settling on her shoulders. For the first time in years, she looked small, not because I had made her so, but because she had stripped away her own dignity. Some say I should have stepped in, saved her from the wreckage. Others say I went too far, that revenge blinded me to forgiveness. Maybe they're right, but I know this much. The truth set me free. For decades I had hidden who I was, let myself be belittled to keep the peace. In the end, I didn't just expose Mark. I reclaimed my dignity. Now, when I wear my old Hamilton, it feels different. It doesn't remind me of betrayal anymore. It reminds me of strength, the quiet kind that doesn't need applause, the kind that outlasts arrogance and deceit. I don't know if Emma and I will ever heal fully, but I do know she'll never laugh at me again, and maybe that's enough. The real lesson? Silence can protect, but it can also poison. I stayed quiet so long that I lost her respect. When I finally spoke with actions, it was too late to save what we had, but it was just in time to save myself. Have you ever been in a situation where keeping quiet cost you more than speaking up would have? I'd like to hear your story in the comments. And if this story struck a chord with you, stay with us, subscribe, and share your own voice, because sometimes telling the truth is the only way to heal.